The rhythmic click of Lena Carter's fingers danced across the calculator keys, filling the quiet of her small apartment with a steady hum. It was nearly 5 p.m., and the soft golden light of a South Carolina spring sunset spilled through the blinds, casting long shadows across her desk. Her home office, modest and meticulously kept, smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. She leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning the final line of a year-end report for one of her clients. Just one more adjustment, she thought. Then she'd have to leave. Eli was waiting. "Mom, aren't you done yet?" Lena looked up to see her 10-year-old son peeking into the room, clutching a notebook in his hands. Eli's tousled chestnut hair caught the light as he stepped into the doorway, his blue eyes wide with curiosity. He looked so much like his father, it still took her breath away sometimes, though the resemblance was where the connection ended. "Almost," Lena smiled gently, picking up her now cold mug of coffee. "Did you finish your homework?" Eli nodded eagerly and crossed the room to hand her the notebook. "I solved all the math problems, but I have a question about the Roman Empire. Did they really use concrete?" Lena chuckled softly, setting the mug down. "Yes, they did. And some of their concrete structures are still standing today." She tapped his nose lightly. "Give me 10 minutes, okay? I'll help you after I finish this report." He grinned and ran off, and for a moment Lena allowed herself to breathe. Life wasn't easy, not with the pressure of freelance accounting, no safety net, no partner to lean on, but it was hers. Hers and Eli's, and that was enough. Then her phone rang. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. Martha Carter. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Lena, we need to talk about tomorrow night's engagement party," came the familiar sharpness in Martha's voice, brisk, clipped, never warm. "Tessa's bringing her fiancé. You'll be there, won't you?" Lena's grip on the phone tightened slightly. Her younger sister, Tessa, had always been the golden child, beautiful, charismatic, socially perfect. And Lena? She'd been the practical one, the responsible one, the boring one. "Yes," she replied, careful to keep her voice even. "I'll bring Eli too." A pause crackled across the line. "Well, I suppose that's fine," Martha said at last. "Just make sure he behaves. We don't want any disruptions during Tessa's special evening." Lena's jaw clenched, but she swallowed the words rising in her throat. "Eli's always well behaved, Mom. Still, you know how he gets when he's overexcited. Just keep him in check." Lena said nothing. There was no point arguing with her mother when her mind was already made up. Instead, she shifted the conversation. "So, what does Tessa's fiancé do?" "Ethan Bennett. He's an investment banker from a very respectable family," Martha said, the pride in her voice suddenly thick. "Graduated from Princeton. Cultured, well-traveled, handsome, everything a man should be. He's perfect for her." Lena let the silence stretch just long enough to be polite before murmuring, "Sounds impressive." "He is." Martha didn't seem to catch the irony. "Anyway, I expect you to be on time tomorrow." Click. The call ended before Lena could say goodbye. She stared at the blank screen, heart sinking beneath a familiar weight. In the hallway, Eli's voice called out again. "Mom, I'm going to pack my backpack for school tomorrow." "Okay, honey," she replied, forcing cheer into her voice. But as she stared out the window, watching the sun dip behind the trees, a quiet ache bloomed in her chest, one she hadn't felt in a long time. The kind of ache that came not from being alone, but from being unseen. The next evening, Charleston was drenched in the golden hue of early spring. Magnolia trees bloomed along the sidewalks, their sweet scent weaving through the warm air. Lena stood outside the Carter family estate, a grand colonial-style house nestled at the edge of an old-money neighborhood, holding Eli's hand a little too tightly. She hadn't been back here in over a year. You okay, Mom? Eli looked up at her with the quiet sensitivity he'd inherited from her. She forced a smile. Yeah, just take a deep breath, okay? We'll be in and out. Eli nodded solemnly. I know Grandma and Aunt Tessa don't like us that much. Lena's heart cracked at his words. They're complicated people, she murmured. But you've done nothing wrong. Don't forget that. Inside, laughter and classical music drifted from the dining hall, spilling out into the hallway like champagne foam. The house hadn't changed, still pristine, still cold. Lena's heels clicked against the polished floor as they entered, the walls lined with family portraits. Her face appeared only once, in a faded photo from high school. Tessa's image adorned the rest. Lena! Martha called from the other end of the room, her voice clipped as always. You finally made it. Tessa turned around at the sound of their arrival. She was radiant in a designer cocktail dress, her blonde curls cascading over one shoulder. Her smile was wide but hollow. Well, if it isn't my favorite sister, Tessa said, her tone light but edged. This must be Eli. You've grown. Eli stepped behind Lena slightly, offering a small, polite hi. Then he appeared, Ethan Bennett. He stood beside Tessa with an ease that suggested he didn't quite belong in her world, despite the tailored suit and polished shoes. He was tall, with dark hair and thoughtful eyes that softened the moment they landed on Lena. Tessa's told me a lot about you, Ethan said, extending his hand. Lena hesitated for a heartbeat before shaking it. His grip was warm, grounding. Something about him tugged at the edge of her memory, like a song you half remember from years ago. Nice to meet you, she replied. This is my son, Eli. Ethan crouched down a little to meet the boy's eyes. Hey there, Eli. What grade are you in? Fifth, Eli said, shy but steady. Ethan smiled. Fifth grade. That's when I built a model of the solar system for the school science fair. It had a tiny Jupiter with red paint for the storm. Eli gave a nervous laugh. I like history more than science. Even better, Ethan said. Rome or Egypt? Rome, Eli answered quickly. Good choice, Ethan said, standing again. Smart kid. Tessa cleared her throat sharply. Ethan, would you mind getting me another glass of wine? Ethan's smile faded slightly. Of course. As he walked away, Lena's gaze lingered on him. There was something gentle about him, something out of place among the polished cruelty of this household. Dinner was served in the grand dining room, under a chandelier that had once belonged to Lena's grandmother. The table was filled with laughter, mostly from Martha and Tessa, as they recounted stories about wedding dress fittings and tastings at expensive caterers. Lena sat quietly, Eli's hand in hers under the table, ignored except for the occasional condescending glance. Then Tessa, out of nowhere, smiled sweetly and said, Oh, by the way, Lena, you're not in the bridal party. I meant to tell you earlier. Lena blinked. I'm not. Tessa pouted, feigning regret. I just thought, it's been so long since we were really close. And you've got so much on your plate with work and motherhood. I didn't want to burden you. Martha chimed in, cutting her steak. It's for the best, dear. We don't want things to get messy. Eli could be a distraction. A deep, familiar burn crept into Lena's chest. She said nothing. She'd been here before. Silence was the only shield. Eli squeezed her hand tightly. Ethan looked between the women, his expression unreadable. Then he cleared his throat and said softly, I think family participation is important, especially on a day like this. Tessa waved a manicured hand dismissively. Of course they're invited. I just wanted my bridesmaids to be close friends. That's all. Lena glanced at Ethan, and in that moment something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of cruelty disguised as civility. Later, after dinner, as Lena was helping clear the table, because of course no one else offered, Ethan appeared at her side, holding a stack of plates. I'll help, he said. You don't have to, she replied, not looking at him. Neither do you. But here we are. She paused and finally met his gaze. They expect me to play the practical one. Always have. You're different from what Tessa described, he said, quietly. Lena tilted her head. What do you mean? He shook his head. Nothing. Just, I hope we get more chances to talk. You and Eli. I'd like to know you better. He left with the dishes, and Lena stood there, heart unexpectedly rattled. His face, it lingered in her memory, like a half-faded photograph. Had they met before? She didn't have time to puzzle it out. Eli came running in moments later, eyes bright. Mom, Ethan is nice. I don't get why he's marrying Aunt Tessa. Lena couldn't help but laugh, though the sound caught in her throat. Don't say that, baby. But deep down, she was wondering the same thing. The days that followed unfolded like a carefully choreographed play, lavish, glittering, and entirely devoid of authenticity. The Carter family buzzed with preparations for Tessa's wedding, and Lena, as expected, found herself quietly handling the logistics that no one else cared for. Seating arrangements, budget reconciliations, guest list edits, all the invisible work that kept an event like this from falling apart. No one thanked her, but Ethan noticed. You're helping again, he said one afternoon, stepping into the sunlit drawing room where Lena was poring over spreadsheets for the venue. His tone wasn't casual, it was curious, maybe even concerned. Lena didn't look up. Tessa's too busy planning her floral arch to deal with actual numbers. Ethan smiled faintly. You're good at this. I have to be. I run a household on a freelance accountant's income. She finally glanced at him. And I like things that make sense. Ethan studied her for a moment, then said quietly, You seem familiar somehow. Lena's hands paused on the keyboard. She looked up again, this time slower. I've been feeling the same, but I can't place it. Before either of them could say more, a voice broke the moment. Mom, Ethan, I finished my homework. Eli barreled into the room, notebook in hand. His cheeks were flushed, eyes bright. Great, Lena said, standing up. What did you work on? A history project, Eli said proudly, flipping to a page. I wrote about the Roman Empire and how they used aqueducts. Ethan lit up. Seriously? That's awesome. Did you know they could carry water over 50 miles without a pump? Eli gasped. No way. Lena stood back, watching as Ethan knelt beside her son, leafing through the pages of his project. It was such a small thing, his genuine interest, but it meant more than words could express. No man in her life had ever knelt like that. No man had ever looked Eli in the eyes and truly seen him. The warmth in Lena's chest was unfamiliar and dangerous. Later that evening, Lena sat at her kitchen table, reviewing invoices with a pencil between her fingers. The apartment was quiet. Eli was asleep, the dishes done. Her mind kept drifting to Ethan, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the ease with which he spoke to her son. She was pulled from her thoughts by a sudden buzz. Her phone lit up, Ethan Bennett. Her heart skipped. Hi, she said, voice cautious. I hope I'm not bothering you. No, just finishing some work. I wanted to ask you something unusual. There was a pause. Would you consider being the maid of honor? Lena froze. What? I know Tessa didn't ask you. I asked her myself. She wasn't thrilled, but she agreed. Why? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because it's wrong the way they treat you. And because I want someone real standing beside us, not just a photo prop in a matching dress. Lena swallowed hard. I don't know if I can. I understand. I just thought you deserved the choice. After a long silence, she said, Thank you for asking. The next morning, her phone rang again. Martha. The venom in her mother's voice was immediate. Tessa is crying. What did you say to Ethan? Nothing. He asked me. I didn't push for anything. You always do this, Martha snapped. You always find a way to steal the spotlight. This is Tessa's moment. Lena inhaled slowly. I don't want her spotlight. I just want to support my family, if that's even what this is. Well, it's too late to back out now, Martha snapped. Just don't make yourself too visible. No one wants to hear about your struggles at a wedding. The line went dead. Lena lowered the phone and stared at the table, fists clenched. The familiar ache in her chest was back, deeper this time. But beneath it was something else, something harder, more defined. Not rage. Resolve. The morning of the wedding arrived dressed in soft gray clouds, as if the sky itself held its breath. Charleston was quiet in that sacred, suspended way only special days ever were. Lena stood in front of her mirror in the bedroom, smoothing the simple sky-blue dress she'd chosen. It wasn't flashy. It didn't shimmer or cling or compete, but it was elegant in its restraint, and it was hers. Behind her, Eli sat on the bed, swinging his legs. He was already in his little navy suit, the one he insisted made him look like a secret agent. His tie was crooked. You look beautiful, Mom, he said, his voice soft. Lena turned, touched by the earnestness in his eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. Do you want me to fix your tie? He nodded, and she knelt, straightening it with practiced hands. Are you nervous? She asked. Eli shrugged. A little. But I don't care what Grandma says. You're the nicest person I know. Lena blinked hard and kissed the top of his head. Let's go, Agent Carter. The church was old, stone, ivy-clad, steeped in history. Its stained glass windows cast jewel-colored light across the pews as guests trickled in, all of them wrapped in perfume and designer fabric. Lena arrived early, holding Eli's hand, and tried to keep her breath even as she walked past familiar faces who looked at her like a smudge on clean glass. Inside the bridal preparation room, Tessa stood surrounded by bridesmaids in matching silk gowns, her own dress a masterpiece of lace and glittering crystals. She looked like a queen, and she acted like one, too. When Lena entered, Tessa barely glanced at her. Well, you made it, she said, voice clipped. Martha looked her over, lips pursed. That dress, it's very you. Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. She wasn't here to impress them. The ceremony began with pomp and grace. Lena stood behind Tessa at the altar, her hands clasped gently in front of her. She could feel Ethan's gaze on her from time to time, calm and grounding. He looked nothing like a man about to bind himself to someone so hollow. When they kissed, it was brief, polite, practiced, and then came the reception. The venue had been transformed into a glimmering ballroom, candlelit and pristine. Guests mingled, champagne flowed, and the orchestra played something light and expensive. Lena sat at a corner table with Eli, both of them quietly eating, trying not to feel the stares that drifted their way like smoke. She was fine with being invisible. She had long since stopped expecting anything else. Until the speeches began. Tessa took the microphone with the smile of someone who lived for attention. Everyone, she began sweetly, thank you for coming today to celebrate our love. It means so much to share this moment with family and friends. Polite applause. She continued, her eyes scanning the room. Marriage is such a blessing, but it's not something everyone gets to experience. Some people, well, they settle into other roles. Lena's stomach twisted. Something was coming. Tessa turned her gaze directly toward her. Like my sister, Lena, she said, her smile unchanged. A strong single mother. She's never been married, but she's doing her best. Uneasy laughter bubbled through the room. Anyone want to give her a second chance? She added, her voice lilting with mock sweetness. She's practically vintage. Silence fell like a blade. Lena froze, blood draining from her face. Eli's small hand gripped hers under the table tight. I'm just kidding, Tessa said with a giggle. Sort of. More laughter now. Crueler. Martha rose and took the mic. Our eldest daughter has always been so serious. So practical, she said with a forced laugh. But she's still useful. She comes with a very well-behaved accessory. She gestured toward Eli. Laughter again. Louder this time, more confident. Someone clinked their glass. Eli's hand trembled in Lena's. She turned to look at him. His eyes shimmered with confusion and something worse. Humiliation. That was when she stood, slowly, deliberately. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor cut through the chatter like a blade. "Let's go," she whispered to her son. But before they could move, another sound stopped her. A chair scraping. Another figure rising. Ethan. He stood across the room, his jaw clenched, face flushed. Every eye in the venue turned toward him. Even the musicians faltered. His voice, when it came, was calm, but beneath the calm was something sharp, controlled, dangerous. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, stepping toward the center, "today was meant to be the most important day of my life, and it is, but not for the reason you think." He turned slowly toward Tessa. Her smile faded. Martha shifted uncomfortably in her seat. And Lena didn't move. She didn't breathe, because something in Ethan's voice told her that the storm was just beginning. A hush fell over the ballroom, like the air itself had thickened. The glitter of chandeliers seemed suddenly harsh, artificial. Guests exchanged glances, half expecting Ethan to crack a grin and spin it all into a joke. But his face was still, sincere. Ethan turned to the crowd, his voice steady, slicing through the silence. "I want to say something about that speech just now, about what was said to Lena and to Eli." Martha straightened in her chair, her lips pursed in warning. Tessa took a step toward him, dress shimmering with each movement, her expression teetering between confusion and growing fear. "That speech was cruel," Ethan continued, "and frankly it disgusted me. Not because it was tasteless, though it was, but because it came from people I was about to call family." Gasps echoed around the room. Someone dropped a fork. Lena stood frozen by the table, one hand clutching Eli's, the other pressed tightly against her side, as if to hold herself together. "But I suppose now is as good a time as any to tell the truth," Ethan said, turning back to Tessa. His voice dropped to something more personal. "You said Lena never knew love, that she was alone, used. But the truth is Lena Carter saved my life." Tessa's mouth parted, but no words came. Ethan turned to the crowd once more. 10 years ago, my younger sister, Grace, was in her final months of leukemia. She was 24. The hospital was suffocating. The grief unbearable. My family was coming apart at the seams. And in the middle of all of that, there was this woman. He looked across the room, locking eyes with Lena. Her breath caught. She wasn't a doctor or a nurse. She was just there, every day, folding blankets, reading books out loud to people who'd stopped hoping, talking to families who couldn't talk to each other. She brought my sister comfort in the darkest weeks of her life. Lena's eyes widened as recognition hit her like a wave breaking on stone. Grace, of course, the girl in room 312, the one who never lost her sense of humor, even as her hair fell out in clumps, the one Lena sat with in silence on nights no one else showed up. Grace had a brother, she remembered, tall, withdrawn, angry at the world. "I was that brother," Ethan said now as if reading her thoughts. "Angry, lost. And one day she handed me a letter. She said it was written by the volunteer who always made her smile. That letter said grief doesn't go away, but kindness makes it bearable. That letter was from Lena." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan's voice thickened. "I never forgot you, Lena, even when I didn't remember your name." He turned to look at Eli now. "And you, Eli, you used to come with your mom, didn't you? You were just a little boy. You gave Grace hand-drawn pictures of rocket ships and superheroes. She taped them to the wall beside her bed." Eli's eyes widened. "I remember. She called me the tiny professor." I drew her a picture of Saturn. Ethan smiled, a fragile, broken thing. She kept that picture until the end. The room was silent. Ethan turned back to Tessa. When I met you, I didn't know you were Lena's sister. You were light and bold, and I wanted to believe that was what I needed to escape my own shadows. But as time went on, I saw something else: pettiness, coldness, cruelty. Tessa's voice finally broke through the silence, sharp and trembling. You're doing this now? In front of everyone? Ethan didn't blink. Yes, because everyone here deserves to know who I am, and who you are. He reached for his left hand, slid the wedding ring from his finger, and placed it on the nearest table with a soft clink that sounded louder than any scream. I won't marry you, Tessa. The words hit like thunder. Martha gasped, staggering to her feet. This is insane. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Ethan turned to her, eyes cold. You stood there and laughed while your grandson was humiliated, while your daughter was dehumanized. I won't be part of a family that glorifies cruelty. Lena stood motionless, still clutching Eli's hand, her heart slamming against her ribs. Ethan stepped forward. I've been searching for that girl from the hospital for years. Not actively, not with hope, just always wondering. And then I met you again, Lena. I just didn't realize it was you until now. He looked down at Eli, and I saw her in your son. The same kindness, the same quiet strength. Eli blinked up at him, stunned. Do you mean it was really your sister? Ethan smiled softly. She adored you. From behind them came the sound of hurried footsteps. Tessa, tearing across the ballroom, veil trailing like smoke, makeup streaked with mascara and fury. Michael, Ethan, whatever. You can't be serious. Ethan didn't turn. He walked toward Lena and Eli, stopping just before them. If you'll have me, he said, voice gentle, eyes shining. I'd rather leave here with the two of you than spend one more minute pretending this family is something it's not. Lena stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Together, with Eli between them, they turned and walked out, past the stunned faces, the gasping guests, the broken facade of what was meant to be a perfect day. And behind them, the sound of Tessa's scream cracked through the church, like lightning splitting the sky. The heavy oak doors of the reception hall swung shut behind them with a final thud, cutting off the echoes of Tessa's rage. Outside, the late afternoon air was crisp, the sky slowly turning from silver to gold as the sun dipped lower over Charleston's historic rooftops. They walked in silence toward the parking lot. Ethan's steps were slow, deliberate. Eli held Lena's hand tightly, his little shoulders tense beneath the fabric of his suit jacket. Lena finally spoke, her voice still shaky. Are you okay? Ethan glanced sideways, letting out a long breath. Honestly, no, but I've never felt more sure of anything in my life. They reached Lena's car, her modest, dented sedan parked awkwardly between two luxury SUVs, and paused. Lena turned to Ethan. You just gave up everything in there. He shook his head. I gave up nothing worth keeping. Eli climbed into the back seat without a word, pulling the seatbelt across his chest and staring out the window. The silence inside the car felt dense, like everyone was trying to process what had just happened. As Lena reached for her keys, Ethan touched her arm gently. Do you want to grab dinner somewhere? I think we all need to come down from that mess. Lena hesitated, but then she saw Eli's reflection in the rearview mirror, wide-eyed, quiet, still shaken. He needed more than silence tonight. So did she. All right, she said softly. Somewhere quiet. They found a little seafood restaurant tucked away by the harbor, its windows glowing warmly as the sun set over the water. The hostess seated them near the window, where they could see the sailboats drifting across the horizon, their white sails catching the last rays of daylight. Menus sat untouched for a while. Eli was the first to speak, his voice small. Why did you get engaged to Aunt Tessa? Ethan took a sip of water before answering. Because I thought she was the answer to something I was trying to fix. After Grace died, I went dark for a long time. Tessa, she was bright, loud, distracting. He set his glass down. But being loud isn't the same as being kind. And brightness without warmth fades fast. Lena looked out the window, watching the light ripple across the water. When did you realize who I was? I didn't, he admitted. Not until I saw Eli. I remembered his drawings. The way Grace would wait for him every week like it was Christmas. And then today, when they humiliated you, his jaw clenched. It just clicked. The way you stood there. The way you didn't flinch, even when it hurt. That's who you were back then, too. Lena didn't reply right away. Instead, she reached for Eli's hand on the table. He gave it freely. You know, she said after a moment, I kept your sister's letter. The one she gave me right before she passed. She said her brother had a poet's heart, but didn't know it yet. Ethan laughed under his breath, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding built not on infatuation or circumstance, but shared grief and gratitude. A slow, sturdy kind of hope. Their food arrived, and for a while they just ate. No questions, no past, just the comfort of clinking cutlery and soft jazz playing through the speakers. A family of three, not yet defined but slowly forming. Afterward, Ethan walked them to their apartment. The street was quiet, lit by the warm glow of porch lights and spring lanterns hanging from balconies. Lena stopped at the doorstep and turned to him. Thank you, she said, for today, for everything. He looked at her with a kind of reverence. Thank you, for saving my sister, for raising Eli into someone she would have adored. Lena hesitated, then smiled. Do you want to come by tomorrow? For coffee? Ethan's eyes lit up. I'd love that. Just then, Eli appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Are you going to tell me more about Grace tomorrow? Ethan nodded. Of course, buddy. I'll tell you everything. Lena stood in the doorway as he walked back to his car, watching him under the dim light of the street lamps. Just before getting in, Ethan turned back and gave her a small, certain smile. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. Not relief, not victory, peace. 3 months passed. Greenville bloomed under the early summer sun, and with it, so did Lena's life. Not in grand, dramatic gestures, but in the quiet, lasting ways that truly mattered. The little accounting business she had started, Carter and Bennett Financial Solutions, was growing fast, fueled by word of mouth and the kind of integrity clients remembered. Ethan helped her build it from the ground up, not just with capital, but with belief. Every time she hesitated, he reminded her, You've been building things alone for years. Now you don't have to. Their office was modest. 2 rooms above a bakery downtown, the scent of cinnamon rolls drifting through their open windows most mornings. Lena decorated it with soft gray walls, old books, and a small frame that held Grace's final letter. It hung above her desk, facing the morning light. Eli flourished. Now 11, he had grown taller, his steps more confident, his voice louder when he laughed. He had been voted captain of the school soccer team and even started tutoring younger students in history. When asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, someone like Ethan. One weekend, the 3 of them took a drive to the edge of St. Helena Island. There, beneath the wide South Carolina sky, tucked away in a quiet family plot shaded by moss-draped oaks, lay a simple gravestone. Grace Bennett, beloved daughter and sister, loved beyond years. Fresh flowers had already been placed on the grave. Ethan knelt and gently arranged them again. Lena stood beside him, one hand resting on Eli's shoulder. I kept my promise, sis, Ethan whispered, voice catching slightly. I found the girl you told me to look for, the one with quiet strength and too much heart. Lena knelt beside him and took his hand. Eli placed a smooth, white stone atop the grave, his own tradition. It was a small thing, but Grace would have understood. She always did. I still feel like she's watching over us, Eli murmured. She is, Lena said softly. She always has been. Behind them, the sun slipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass. Far from this peace, in a sterile luxury apartment in uptown Charleston, Tessa Carter was packing. The wedding disaster had made headlines. Runaway groom leaves bride mid-vow had trended online for nearly a week. Sponsors pulled out. Friends disappeared. Her once coveted invitations went unanswered. Every few weeks, she tried to call Lena. She left long voicemails, teary apologies, rambling regrets. But Lena never answered. The hurt had gone too deep, had been sharpened over too many years. Some bridges didn't burn. They simply dissolved. And Lena? She didn't need to burn anything down. She had outgrown the whole battlefield. That winter, on Christmas Eve, Lena, Ethan, and Eli sat curled up by the fireplace in their small living room, now adorned with mismatched ornaments and stockings. Outside, the snow fell in quiet flurries of rare southern snowfall. Inside, it was warm, safe, quiet. Eli had fallen asleep on the couch, a half-eaten cookie still in his hand. The glow of the fire danced across his face. Lena reached over and brushed his hair from his forehead. "He's getting too big to carry to bed," she whispered. Ethan chuckled. "I'll still try. One more year before he outweighs me." Then, gently, he reached into his pocket. Lena turned as he held out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Before you say anything," Ethan said softly, "this doesn't have to mean anything other than what we already have. I just wanted you to know that I'm here. Not as a rescue. Not as a replacement. Just as me." She opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. A single sapphire the color of Eli's eyes. Lena looked up, and in his face she saw no demand, no expectation. Just a question. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a breath. 1,000 times yes. From the couch, Eli stirred. "Wait, did I miss something?" They laughed. "You missed everything," Ethan said, pulling him into a hug. Eli yawned. "You're going to be my stepdad now. If you'll have me." Eli considered it for a long, serious moment. "Only if you still help me with my history homework." "Deal." That night, as the snow continued to fall beyond the frosted windows, Lena stood by the fire, watching the two people she loved most settle into sleep. Her life hadn't followed the path she once imagined, but in its winding, painful detours, it had led her somewhere real, somewhere whole. She thought of Grace. "Thank you," she whispered in her heart, "for the part you played in bringing me home."